Hello friends, my name is Gaurav Bansal and I will be discussing with you a very important issue that is unfolding right now in the form of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is an ongoing conflict and has been in news for almost 2 months now. And now, since the conflict has spiraled into a full-fledged war, a lot of people are asking for explanation. What is there for Russia? Why Russia is in for this conflict? And what really is it going to gain? So today I'm going to discuss this from the economic perspective, the economics behind the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The focus so far in our mainstream media and discussion has been the geopolitical, which focuses on the requirement for Russia to maintain a buffer state between the NATO and its land border. And it wants Ukraine to be in its own sphere of influence rather than leaving it to the sphere of NATO. If Russia allows Ukraine to join NATO, then NATO forces would be sitting right next to the Russian border, and Moscow will not be very far from their range. And this precisely is the reason why Russia has been very strictly against the Ukraine joining EU and the NATO. Now, coming back to the topic, we have to understand it from economic perspective. And the economic perspective of this conflict is the need for Russia to have a warm water port. Russia is a very large country, but unfortunately it was not geographically very blessed. Russia has a very long coastline. It has a big access to the oceans, but unfortunately most of this access is towards frozen, harsh oceans, which is very expensive to maintain, manage to keep them navigable. And despite the best effort of yours, still for a large part of you, these ports are unusable. If you look at the north of Russia, there is Arctic Ocean. This is frozen cold ocean. Similarly, if we look to the east of Russia, even here also we have very frozen North Pacific. All this region from here to here is quite cold, and this is not navigable throughout the year, and maintenance of ports is also more expensive. Plus, all these regions are very far away from the Russia's main industrial heartland, the Russia's main population center, which is very much the west, let us say somewhere here. Okay, so to the left of this line, a very rough line, okay, Ural Mountains, let us say, almost 75 to 80% population of Russia lives, and very little population lives in this large part which is known as Siberia. While this Kamchatka Peninsula, which is part of Russia, has access to a bit of warm water. It is not exactly warm, but it is not even frozen cold. But the transportation from here to Kamchatka is very, very expensive. So given that Russia always in its history has been looking for a port, a warm water port that is close to its industrial heartlands. The first warm water port that Russia got was won for it by Peter the Great. And Peter the Great got this small land by having a war with Sweden, and that was long ago. Okay? And then he established the city of St. Petersburg, which is the second most important city, and for a very long time has served as the capital of the Russia, and is also their main warm water port. It is their access to the west, and through this small area they can access Baltic Sea. To the north of St. Petersburg is the Finland, and here we have Sweden, and here we have Norway. While to the south of it we have Baltic nations, which are Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And when we come further south, you can see here the entire border is landlocked up to here. Then there is very small access to the Black Sea, and unfortunately this is not very suitable for development of ports. And if we look to the south of Russia, it is entirely landlocked. Here we have China, then Mongolia, and then Kazakhstan. And here we have Georgia and Azerbaijan. So there are different countries to its south. It is landlocked from the south. So if Russia want access to warm water port, it had only one option, that was St. Petersburg. Then little later, another great monarch in the Russian history, that is Catherine the Great, in 1783, she won this small area in this circle that I have highlighted. This small area is a peninsula, and that peninsula falls in the Black Sea, and through this peninsula they have access to a natural harbor and a deep port, which gives them the access to the Mediterranean Sea. And this is something Russia always wanted. So with the two warm water ports, Russia now had the trade security that it always wanted. So for a very long time, Russia has held these territories. And Ukraine was also part of the USSR. But after 1991, Ukraine became an independent republic, and Russia lost this very important port, which is known as Sevastopol. And this entire peninsula is called as Odessa. And this entire region is also called Crimea, and this is what Russia captured in 2014. Now try to understand, even though Ukraine and Russia, they separated as different countries in 1991, the port of Sevastopol in Crimean region was still accessed by Russia. And Russia had lease on this port. Russia was paying huge rent for using this port to Ukraine. And this particular port was very critical for Russia. So in 2014, when a pro-Russian government fell down and almost an anti-Russian government came to power in Ukraine, then Russia got worried that this government may cancel this lease to this important port. And losing this port would mean losing a lot of trade and access. And that was unacceptable to Russia. So in 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time, and then they captured the Crimean Peninsula. And it is then only when they also supported some of the rebel forces in this region, which is known as the Donbas region. I've highlighted this region here. So it was the need for a warm water port. Now, since India is very blessed to have access to a very long coastline and which is also accessible throughout the year, so we do not realize the importance of a warm water port for a north country. So for Russia, it is critical to have these two ports, St. Petersburg, which gives them access to the northern Europe and to the Atlantic Ocean, and then this port which gives them access through Istanbul to Mediterranean Sea and then ultimately to the Indian Ocean. So for Russia, these two are very critical, and Russia wants to maintain them at any cost. So in 2014, Russia got worried that this anti-Russian government in Ukraine may cancel the lease and may take over this port, and then Russia will lose access. So this was the reason why it captured the Crimean Peninsula. Okay, and since then they were maintaining a status quo, but recently in 2021, when Ukraine once again accelerated its efforts to join NATO and European Union, Russia got worried once again, because if NATO forces can come to the north of Crimean Peninsula, then Russia can very easily lose access to this important port city and this entire area. And this precisely is what Putin has also mentioned in his press conference, that if NATO comes to the Ukraine, if NATO forces enter Ukraine and deploy their missiles, then there is no guarantee that tomorrow they would not want to recapture this very important area of Crimea. And to secure this Crimea, Russia wanted to give Ukraine a bloody nose. Russia wanted to give Ukraine a blow and a thrashing which they will remember for several generations. I'm not arguing on behalf of Russians, I'm not justifying it on behalf of Russians, but I'm saying that Russia do have a geopolitical need in order to do so. Well, whether you can do so at the cost of sovereignty of another country is another debate, which I would not like to get into at present. My entire explanation here is focusing at the reason behind this war, why Russia entered, why Russia is consistently involved, and what does it want. So this point I am explaining, and that is why I am explaining it from the Russian perspective, what Russia want from here. So they have secured this in 2014, and now they have declared this area, the Donbas region, as an independent country, which so far no other country has recognized, but eventually some of their friends will over time. So at present, Russia has moved forces very swiftly inside this region and has almost secured this region. And at the same time, it is also destroying the military capabilities of Ukraine. The idea is to cripple Ukraine militarily and also to destroy their morale, so that in future, Ukraine will not gather the courage to join NATO, and West will also think twice before trying to enter Ukraine. So this precisely seems to be the plan of Vladimir Putin as of now, and this is what he wants from here. Now, some of you may think that this region, which is part of Russia, also has access to Black Sea. See, this region has a problem that there is unavailability of natural draft. What is a natural draft? That the depth of sea floor here is not suitable for developing a significant and large port. And also the tides here are bigger, and which creates problem for 24-hour navigation. So this is the reason why this region is not very suitable. And after this region, they have no other area except St. Petersburg. So that is why they have captured this Crimean Peninsula. Accidentally, I said Odessa earlier. This is not Odessa. I accidentally mentioned it. So pardon me for that. And now, coming to the last part, what specifically is there in this Donbas region? Donbas region is the most important military industrial conclave or enclave of Russia, or the USSR in the Soviet glory days. So a lot of the coal industry of Ukraine is located here, and the big heavy industry, the tractors, the steel mills, the iron mills, and many other high-end factories which are state-of-art old Soviet era factories are established here, and Ukraine got all of them after the separation. Now, after winning this region, the Russia has also got the most industrialized part of the Ukraine as well. So this region is de facto going to belong to Russia, even though Russia has recognized it as a separate territory, but it is going to treat it as a vassal state, and it is going to appoint a puppet government here. So effectively, Russian border has been extended from here to here. So this is what precisely has happened here. And I hope you have now understood what is the economics behind the Russian and the Ukrainian conflict. Okay? And one more thing I would like to discuss here very briefly, that in the next video I will talk about the economic impact of this conflict. So far I have not discussed that. So there we are going to discuss that Russia is going to face many sanctions. Is this war worth facing all these sanctions? Is the economic cost of war justified the benefits Russia is going to get from this region? So that is something we are going to explain and understand in the next video.